Game of Thrones Season 8, Episode 1. I forgot the title, so I'm just going to call this episode The Game of Reunions and Callbacks to Other Game of Thrones episodes. It's finally here. After the questionable Season 7 and 2 years of waiting, the final season of Game of Thrones is finally back, and their first episode was... alright, I guess. Let's see where it goes. Honestly, I don't want to be too judgmental of this episode. It is the first episode of a season. Usually that is for setting the table. But this episode dragged in a lot of places for me. There were a little too many callbacks. Like the first scene in the episode is a callback to the first episode of Game of Thrones when King Robert arrived at Winterfell. Except this time it's Dany and Jon arriving at Winterfell. I wasn't really feeling it. The little kid climbing. It's like, oh, it's like before when the little kid was climbing. Again, not that appealing to me. I don't want to see callbacks. I want to see new stuff. And another thing that was kind of off for me in this episode was the sheer number of reunions and character introductions. Arya reunited with Jon, Arya reunited with the Hound, Arya reunited with Gendry, Jon reunited with Bran, Jon reunited with Sam, Jon also reunited with Sansa, but that one counts a little less because, you know, he was with her for a good part of last season and the season before that. But there was a reunion there. Everybody gets a reunion. Tyrion and Sansa reunited. They talked about the wedding. Remember the purple wedding when Joffrey died? Remember that Tyrion and Sansa used to be married? Yeah, well, they talked about that because those are things that happened in the show that you've already seen. Tyrion also reunited with Bran. Remember that scene where he built him a saddle to sit on a horse? That worked out well for him, so they reunited. Theon reunited with Yara. He actually freed her in like 35 seconds, so now Theon can go back to Winterfell and he can reunite with people. Everybody's reuniting, and the episode even ends with Jaime Lannister reuniting with Bran. Now, I'm not saying that all of these reunions were bad, even though most of these reunions were bad. It's just that the one reunion that I actually wanted to see, two of the smartest characters getting together, was tragically cut short when the writers killed Peter Baelish in the last season by giving Bran the power to watch all of the seasons of Game of Thrones to compile a case against Peter Baelish. And just to stay on that tangent for a second, there was a moment in this episode where Arya said Sansa was the smartest person she ever met, and I think she was alluding to the events we saw last season. Not anything we saw on screen, but maybe Sansa was secretly putting lead in Littlefinger's wine, and that's why he didn't ask for a trial by combat. That's why he fell for such an obvious trap. Because Sansa didn't really do anything that was smart last season except completely butcher the Stark way with Arya.
I'm just the executioner. You pass the sentence.
Yeah, that's cute and all, Sansa and Arya, but that's just not how that works. It's he who passes the sentence must swing the sword.
The man who passes the sentence should swing the sword.
He completely blew the Stark way, and considering that season 1 starts with Ned Stark passing the sentence and swinging the sword, and then ends with somebody passing a sentence on Ned Stark, and then somebody else swinging his family sword to execute him, you blew the whole point of season 1. You should be embarrassed. That being said, there were some moments that weren't reunions, and they actually seemed like they were going to be new moments in the series. For instance, Jon actually rode Rhaegal, one of Daenerys' dragons. Unfortunately, what could have been a new and interesting moment just turned into a callback, and not a very good callback. You had Daenerys saying, hey, we could just stay here for 1,000 years, which is very similar to what Ygritte said to Jon. We could just stay in the cave forever. Except Dany's character is nowhere near the same character as Ygritte, so didn't really work for me. Now, I know they've called back to Ygritte before when Melisandre told Jon he knows nothing, which was actually interesting because it showed Jon that Melisandre is not to be messed with, and it showed us in the audience that Melisandre is even creepier and stranger than we know. This was just, I guess we're gonna call back because one woman Jon loved said that to him, so this woman that Jon loved will say it to him because for some reason we're filling time in a 6-episode season. I have no explanation. Now look, I know I might sound like I'm coming off as super critical and I might even be bordering on hating, but I'm really not. I know it's the first episode. I know they have to set up a lot of this stuff. I know that since they kept so many characters alive that have met each other before or haven't crossed paths before, that these kind of reunions and interactions kind of have to happen. I just wish they happened a little bit better. But to be fair to the writers, I'm sure it's hard to fit 600 different combinations of reunions in one 60-minute episode, so I'm gonna give them some slack there. It's just that I felt that certain reunions that should have been more emotional, like Arya and Jon, really weren't. For example, for me, in season 7, when Arya found out that Jon rode down from Castle Black and took Winterfell and then became crowned King of the North, that scene was more emotional than her actually meeting Jon, because there were so many reunions in this episode, and that scene actually had, like, genuine emotion, while this one was like, look at our swords, oh, you still have Needle, and it was like a combination of all the things that, like, a fan fiction writer would have had in there, but I would have thought that the show would have realized could have gone without being said so explicitly. Like, she hugs Jon in the exact same way that she hugged him when he left Winterfell in season 1, and it just didn't do anything for me. Which really sucks, because her reaction in season 7 really set up for, like, a more heartwarming reunion, and I just don't like the way that it was played here. Like, maybe throw in the Stark theme a little bit. I could have used that. It was, like, really quiet in the background, and it just didn't do it for me. That being said, there were things that I actually did like in the episode, and the first one that comes to mind is the North not liking the fact that Jon bent the knee to Daenerys. Game of Thrones is a show where there are supposed to be consequences for your actions, and I did like that there were some consequences for Jon giving up his crown to Daenerys. I also did like the fact that Sansa doesn't accept Daenerys, and she doesn't like Daenerys, because that's like the root of the show. It's a game of power politics. I like the part where Bran cuts in and he's like, hey, there's literally no time for this. The Night King has your dragon. He used it to take down the wall, and right now they are marching for Winterfell. That being said, Bran is completely wrong, and he needs to go back and rewatch all 7 seasons, because this is what Game of Thrones is about. There is a looming threat. There's been a looming threat since the end of season 1, but the real meat of the show is people vying for power, so I do like that there is some conflict in the northern camp. I caught a couple of other reviews where people are like, oh, I hope this conflict drops, I'm not really interested in this kind of drama, and I think they're completely wrong. I hope this conflict builds over the course of the season, and that leads me to the 2 scenes and the character that I think saved this episode, and that's Samwell Tarly. So in season 7, after the Lannister forces took Highgarden, Daenerys, the Dothraki, and one of her dragons came in and destroyed the Lannisters, and at the end of the battle she demanded that all of the people that surrendered bend the knee to her, and Sam's father, who I think is Randall, and his brother Dickon refused to bend the knee, and she burned both of them. That was a mistake. Mistakes are supposed to have consequences in this show, so in this episode, when Dany goes to thank Sam for saving Ser Jorah, she figures out that he's Samwell Tarly, and she murdered his brother and his father, and Sam is pissed off about it, and he should be. Now, this technically does play like a callback, since Sam and Jon are basically like brothers, just like Ned and Robert were like brothers. The Mad King murdered Ned's father and Ned's brother, and that's part of what started Robert's rebellion. So the fact that Sam almost immediately after that decided to tell Jon that he's actually a Targaryen and he's the heir to the Iron Throne, and that he doesn't want Daenerys to be queen, and it shouldn't be Daenerys on the throne, and he even challenges Jon and points out that, hey, you were willing to give up your crown to save your people. Do you really think that she's willing to do that? And he points out that Daenerys lied to him. That was actually good stuff, and that was the stuff that I appreciated. Now, this was still a little annoying because this is the 3rd or maybe even the 4th time that this information has been revealed to the audience, and it still has to be revealed one more time to Daenerys. So I'm kind of over that. Like, they've been doing this since season 6, episode 10, and it's like, come on already. Like, he's Aegon Targaryen. He's the heir to the Iron Throne. Can we get this conflict to the forefront? But I did appreciate the fact that Sam actually gave Jon a good reason to question whether or not she should be on the throne, pointed out that Jon is the rightful king, and he actually made a legitimate argument for why he's a better choice than Daenerys. There was an interesting moment near the end of the episode where Ned Umber, the little lord of the Umbers, was pinned to the wall in what looked like a ritualistic killing, which might indicate that the Night King actually has a plan or strategy, and that strategy or plan includes killing the lords of Westeros, and maybe the way that they pinned Ned's body to the wall is indicative of what is to come. Hopefully that pays off down the line, but for now, it's just an okay episode of Game of Thrones. maybe at the end of the season, it will seem like a better setup episode. It's pretty hard to set up the final season of a show that everybody's been waiting years for. So I cut them a little bit of slack in that regard, but let me know what you guys think down in the comments. This is the predictions portion, because predictions are a thing that I like to do based on the scenes from next week's episode, and I think next week's episode is going to be the trial of Jaime Lannister. I think he's actually going to have to plead his case to a tribunal featuring Dany, Jon, and Sansa. I think Daenerys is going to do that in order to like be more inclusive and try to win over support from the North. And I think that they're going to either unanimously agree that Jaime killing the Mad King was justified, or it's going to be a 2 out of 3. Maybe Jaime refuses to plead his case and Tyrion has to defend him, like he needs a champion with words, like Tyrion needs a champion with the sword. Don't know how exactly that's going to work. I don't even know if that's a thing that actually happens in Westerosi tradition and law. But even if that's a thing that's not explicitly allowed in Westerosi law, I feel like they're just going to butcher it and have Tyrion defend Jaime anyway. Anyway, that's all I really have for you guys today. Let me know what you think about Game of Thrones Season 8, Episode 1 in the comments down below. You guys can subscribe for more content, follow me on Patreon, you guys know the drill. These reviews may or may not continue exclusively on the Dude Monkey HQ channel, so let me know what you guys think about that. I might just run through the 6 episodes here and put them there too, but I don't know, I haven't decided. Anyway, that's it. Till next time.